On October 13th, 1792, workers lay the cornerstone of the White House in Washington, D.C. But where is that cornerstone today? And when did the president finally get to move in? Let's find out. But first, we need some background. Just a year earlier, first U.S. President George Washington had chosen a site along the Potomac River to serve as the nation's new capital. At the time, the land was little more than forest and swamp. Congress announced a competition to design the president's house. The winning entry came from an Irish-born architect named James Hoban. He was inspired by elegant European mansions like Dublin's Leinster House, which was built in 1748. On that October day, onlookers gathered for the ceremonial laying of the first stone. Among them were Freemasons, members of the world's oldest fraternal organization with origins in the guilds of stonemasons during the Middle Ages. Many of America's founding fathers, including Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, were Freemasons. George Washington was not in Washington, D.C. for the ceremony, so a local Freemason, Spanish-born Pedro Casanave, presided. Casanave would later serve as mayor of Georgetown, which is now a neighborhood in the nation's capital. Georgetown, by the way, was not named after George Washington. It was, rather, named after Scottish-born merchant George Gordon, who in 1745 built a tobacco inspection house at the site, which was then in the colony of Maryland. About a year later, President Washington did, however, preside over the ceremony for the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building. Construction on the White House moved slowly and depended on both free and enslaved laborers. It took 8 years before the president could move in. That president was not George Washington. It was second U.S. President John Adams in the year 1800, though the residence was still unfinished when he moved in. Washington's second term as president had actually ended more than 3 years earlier. In fact, Washington had died in 1799, so he never saw the White House completed. The nation's capital was Philadelphia for most of Washington's presidency, where he lived in what was known as the President's House, which was owned by founding father Robert Morris. Interestingly, Morris was one of only 2 people who signed the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. The other was Roger Sherman of Connecticut. Unfortunately, the president's house was demolished in 1832, but you can still visit the location today, near the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. It is partially reconstructed to show where the building once stood, and historical placards provide fascinating information about the home and the era. You can even get a peek at an archaeological dig that shows parts of the foundation walls and an underground tunnel that once connected the main house to the kitchen. President John Adams lived at the president's house as well until May 1800 when the capital moved to Washington, D.C. Adams then lived at William Tunnicliffe's City Hotel, the first hotel in Washington, D.C. He stayed there for a few months until the White House was ready on November 1st, 1800. The day after moving in, Adams wrote to his wife Abigail, who would later join him at the White House, quote, "I pray heaven to bestow the best of blessings on this house. May none but wise men ever rule under this roof." End quote. Adams only lived in the White House for 4 months until his single term as president ended. But the White House soon faced its greatest test. In 1814, during the War of 1812, British troops burned the building to the ground. Only the charred exterior walls remained. Original architect James Hoban oversaw the 3-year reconstruction, restoring the home to its neoclassical glory. James Monroe moved into the rebuilt White House in October 1817, 7 months after becoming the 5th U.S. president. The White House has grown alongside the nation itself. Later presidents expanded and modernized it, adding features like the porticos in the 1820s, the Oval Office in 1909, and even a bowling alley in 1947. The Situation Room was added in 1961 after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Indoor plumbing, electricity, and telecommunications lines were also added over time. Even the name changed. The residence was originally known as the President's Palace, but the name was soon changed to the Executive Mansion. The nickname White House emerged early on due to the building's white sandstone exterior. In 1901, President Theodore Roosevelt made White House the building's official name. Today, the White House contains 132 rooms, 35 bathrooms, and over 400 doors. It serves as both a home and a workplace, a symbol of the presidency and the nation itself. Mrs. Lewis and I visited the White House in 2023. It was a profound experience to stand in a place that has been at the center of so many momentous events for more than 200 years. Now, what about that cornerstone? Historians have searched for the original cornerstone, but it has never been found. Some believe it lies buried deep in the southwest corner, sealed beneath centuries of renovation. Others think it was removed during early repairs. The cornerstone's location is a mystery to this day. Here are other events that happened today in history. In AD 54, Roman Emperor Claudius dies, most likely from poisoning by his fourth wife, Agrippina. In 1903, the Boston Americans defeat the Pittsburgh Pirates to win the first modern World Series. In 1943, after Mussolini's ousting, Italy declares war on former ally Germany in World War II. In 1967, the ABA, which pioneers the shot clock and the three-pointer, plays its first game. In 1972, a Uruguayan rugby team's plane crashes in the Andes, with survivors not rescued for months. In 2010, 33 miners trapped underground in Chile's Atacama Desert are rescued after 69 days. In 2021, 90-year-old William Shatner takes flight into suborbital space on a Jeff Bezos rocket. And now it's time for our Today in History quiz. When did Martin Luther King Jr. win the Nobel Peace Prize? 1962? 1964? 1966? Or 1968? Liked learning about the White House cornerstone? Then you'll love this one about how a First Lady saved a White House painting of George Washington. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.